What's going on, people? This is the Black Trekker. Thank you very much for taking time out your evening or day to listen to my video. I would like for you to like, share, and subscribe. By all means, tell family members and friends that loves Trek or science fiction in general. Or if they're new to science fiction in general, tell them anyway, so we can pull them into the sphere of hope and futurism. With that being said, I would like to talk to you about a particular situation that happened in TNG history. And that particular situation was related to the encounter with Q. Now, Q represents the Q continuum. And the Q continuum is a collection or a confederacy of nigh omnipotent beings that have great deals of power. Now, some people would consider them to be gods, but they're not. They're just extremely advanced, technologically perhaps, beings that have the ability to wield immense power. No different than what the Starship Enterprise probably possesses to Bronze Age civilization. Anything, there's a scientific statement that has been used for many, many years. A sufficiently advanced, technologically advanced civilization, I'm paraphrasing, is completely indistinguishable from magic. And this is true. The crew of the Enterprise, with their technology, you go back 1,000 years, they would probably been perceived as gods. To us, we live in the 21st century, that wouldn't be the case. We would recognize that they're using technology. So it's a little bit difficult to be able to determine if the Q are using technology. All they do is snap their fingers and everything changes. So that might be a trigger device for a particular technology that the crew of the Enterprise can't understand yet, or it might be they just have mind control, whichever. But the point of it is that Q introduced the crew of the Enterprise to the Borg. Now, why did he do this? What was the reasoning behind it? Was he trying to be malevolent on purpose? Because a lot of people have said Q is malevolent. Q is a villain. Q is someone that wishes to do harm to the crew of the Enterprise. And I say that's absolutely nonsense. That's not true. One thing about Q that I've observed from the absolute all of his videos and all of his appearances with the crew of the Enterprise is it seems like it's a teachable moment. He's trying to teach the Enterprise crew something correlated to life in general, and especially the exploration of the galaxy. Because there was one particular episode where he made the statements about Shakespeare. And he said, "These are the ramblings of a fool. All the world is a stage." And Picard corrected him by saying that was from his perspective because Shakespeare didn't know about the galaxy. He didn't know about extraterrestrial life. So therefore, from his perspective, he said all the world was a stage. But if he lived in the 24th century, he would have said all the galaxy is a stage. So with that being said, he would have talked about how mankind's interaction with the galaxy at large has been definitely predicated on our experiences. But unfortunately, Shakespeare died in the 16th, 17th century, one of those time frames. So he didn't know. But the thing is that I think Q had an affinity, an appreciation for mankind. One thing that Picard would often do when Q would appear is he would give them these long, whimsical speeches. And in fact, Q, in the episode called True Q, Q said it himself. He said, "I don't know why I come here if it's not just for these wonderful speeches." So he enjoyed Picard. That's why he was present. And to an extent, if I had powers similar to Q, I probably would go and harass the U.S. Navy. I probably would do that. I would just appear and I would find a captain that I wanted to bother, and I would harass them to no end. And the U.S. Navy would be absolutely annoyed by my presence, but it would be nothing they could do about it. And I would give them teachable moments. You know, it's not as vast as the exploration of space, but I would still be able to teach a captain a lesson or two. Now, the reason why, and I believe this, that Q exposed the Enterprise and the larger Federation as a whole to the Borg is because the Federation was in a golden age. The Galaxy class starship was top of the line. It was the most sophisticated, most advanced piece of technology that humans or anybody in the Federation had ever created. So they were sitting on their laurels. They were patting themselves on the back. They were pleased with themselves like Ferengis. Ferengis, they get profit, they're greedy, they're excited, and they're chilling. And that's exactly what happened with the Federation. The Federation was in love with their notion because the Klingon Empire was no longer a threat. The Romulan Empire was a threat, but not somebody that they really worried about because the Romulans knew that the Federation was technologically on par with them. So they were like, nah, we're not going to mess with the Federation. Our ships are bigger in size. However, their ships are just as powerful, just as advanced, and by all accounts, the Enterprise D was faster than a Romulan Dideridex class starship. I think the Romulan Dideridex class starships were able to go at like warp 8.5, whereas a Galaxy class starship was able to go at warp 9.3, significantly faster. And also the sensors were better, and the weapon systems and the armaments and the shields were better. So all in counts, all things naturally speaking, the Romulans weren't really a threat. The Breen, they didn't know anything about the Breen. The Breen wasn't messing with the Federation. So, in all honesty, the Federation was pretty confident that they had a good bead on the galactic politics of the Alpha and the Beta Quadrant. And the Cardassians weren't no match for the Federation. No way. So, the Federation was sitting on its laurels. They were very confident. And what Q came along was saying that, hey, Picard, let me be a member of your crew. Let me, a lowly entity. And Picard rejected him because Picard, an arrogant, over-the-top officer, comfortable with his position, felt that he didn't need Q. And then also, he felt that Q was an annoyance. And he felt that Q also, with all of his abilities and his powers, was going to be a distraction to his crew over the long run. Now, looking at it in hindsight, I'm pretty sure Picard would have accepted Q's request. I, on the other hand, would have accepted Q's request simply for the fact that his abundance of knowledge in a particular area of the galaxy that we're going into would have been very interesting. He could have updated our computer banks with knowledge that we would have completely not known. Now, the question is, could he have finagled our computer banks? Perhaps, but that wasn't never Q's objective, was to provide information that wasn't valid or rational. So I would have definitely had him. I would have had him sit with Data for hours and just talk about the areas of the galaxy that we're going into, so then Data could make it into a report and it could disseminate it to the general staff, and we'll be going into each and every new quadrant with a full knowledge of the species that live in those quadrants, the galactic phenomenon, all of that things. And then we would be able to let the Federation know at large what was actually going on in that particular region of space. That was a very bad judgment call on Picard's part because of his own hubris that made him say, nah, we are fully... He said something to the effect that, how can we be prepared for what we don't know? But I tell you what, we are ready to encounter it. That right there, that statement was arrogant. And it was over the top, and it was very disrespectful considering the fact that the Q were, by all means, the most advanced creatures that the Federation ever encountered. Even beyond the creatures that supposedly seeded the galaxy with life. Far more advanced than them, far more powerful than them. Q said in an episode to Riker that the Federation had potential to be as powerful, if not more powerful, than the Q. That leads me to believe that the Q used technology because of the simple fact that the Federation is prevalent on using what? Technology. So the Q has some kind of technology that's far more advanced than what humans can comprehend, and because of that rationale, they were able to manipulate space and time far greater than what the humans on the 24th century could do. I mean, just think of it. If we had warp drive, real FTL like in the Star Trek universe, we would be populating every possible corner of our solar system initially. Even if we just had warp 2, we would be all the way to Alpha Centauri by now. If we would have had warp drive in the 1960s, we would have been to Alpha Centauri. We would have been colonized most of the solar system by now. But because we don't have that technology, we don't. And we're limited and we're stuck on our, for all intents and purposes, backwatered planet. The technology that we have, the lights, the heating systems, and everything like the televisions, make us pretty advanced compared to any other creature on Earth. But in the grand scheme of things, in a galactic term, we're primitive. I can acknowledge that. I'm pretty sure that you will as well. Although I'm having the ability to communicate with you and you could be on the other side of the planet, we're still technologically primitive. Now, Q told Picard, you're not ready for what awaits you out there. But again, because Picard was complacent and arrogant, and he believed that the Enterprise D was the finest ship in the galaxy. And don't get me wrong, compared to other species in the galaxy like the Kazon and the Mulan and perhaps the I never can remember what the race of Kess is, but the Kess race and the Talaxians, of course, their technology is way more advanced than them. And the ship would have been unmatched in the Delta Quadrant, no problem. But the problem is that the Q are not from our galaxy. They originated somewhere way beyond. So when Q snapped his fingers and when he's like, we'll see just how ready you are. And right before he snapped his fingers, Gyna said Q because she knew what Q was about to do. Snapped his fingers, bam, they move, get knocked 7,000 light years. Now again, 7,000 light years in terms of going warp 9.3 is still a hell of a lot far. I mean, it's kind of like traveling at warp 9.3 for like 3 years. So it's a good distance. And then also the Borg have transwarp. So they could get 7,000 light years in probably about 20 minutes. So it's nothing to them. But it was something for the Federation. Now, what did the Federation do? When Picard got to that system that was 120 years away from them at warp 5, what did he do? He wanted to explore the planet. Now, the planet had similarities to parts of the Neutrazome that were carved up and destroyed. And they were able to find out, well, who was it? But then Guinan said, hey, Picard, you might want to start back now to the Federation. But Picard was like, no, we're going to explore that. Again, arrogant, hubris. And the Q was like, look, man, you know, these are wonders, both scary and grotesque. But this is not for the faint of heart. That's what he said at the end of the episode. So Picard wanted to still explore. And then finally, what happens? An unknown vessel appears. It's oddly uniformed because it's a square. It's a cube. They scan it. They send emissaries. Now, these emissaries ain't the ones that want to be diplomatic and have conversations with you. These are the emissaries that want to scan your technology, figure out what you are. Picard is an engineer and trying to be diplomatic. We mean you no harm. Q appears in his ear. You're nothing to them. They don't care about you. They care about your technology. They're trying to assess if you're a threat. Bam. Then the Borg get on the screen. We are the Borg. Lower your weapons. You're defenseless. So finally, they start attacking the Enterprise D. Enterprise D shows something to the Borg. Their technology is sufficiently advanced enough where what happens? Their technology, their phaser technology is powerful enough to cause extreme damage to their ships. Because other powers, their technology wouldn't have did nothing to the Borg cube except make them annoyed and been like, look, this ain't even worth our time. But because the Enterprise was able to inflict 20% damage overall on the total cube, it's like, whoa. And the cube is 3,000 meters in diameter. So 3,000 meters in diameter, and the Galaxy-class starship is 647 meters at length. This is a significantly smaller vessel that was able to implement so much damage and inflict so much damage on the Borg. So they wanted to do is they went and explored the Borg ship. And then what occurred? They discovered that they were synthetic, mechanical, cybernetic life forms. They got this information. But again, what did Picard do? Because he was arrogant. He was taking his time to study the thing. And I don't know why, for the life of me, Picard thought it was a good idea to fire, and he was causing damage to the ship, and then he was like, stop. Why would you stop at 20%? I would have hit the Borg until at least 85% of their ship was destroyed, and then I would have sent in a crew to do some exploration. But again, hubris. And then what happens? Once they discovered that the ship was repairing itself, then they go to warp. But then it was too late, because what occurred? The Borg ship was pursuing them. Now again, the Galaxy class has a very advanced warp drive system, warp 9.3. So from the Borg's perspective, they had a good lead on the board. They were probably like 5 or 6 minutes ahead of the Borg compared to other species that might be like 10 or 15 seconds. So what did Picard do? He gave the order to fire the photon torpedoes. They had maximum imaging, and they would be able to see. The torpedoes had no damage because the Borg did what? They adapted. And then what happened is they were trying to fire their photon torpedoes again, and the Borg caught up to them. They fired some kind of beam that drained their shields, and then when they drained their shields, it slowed their engines down, and to the point where they were completely caught. And then they had their repulsor beam that grabbed them and hold them in place. And then they started to have this big ass laser cut into the ship like a big ass pot roast. And then Picard was about to fire the photon torpedoes again. And finally, Ration hit him. And he said, Q, end this. And Q was like, why? Why would I be even inclined to do this? And he was like, you wanted to frighten us? For the moment, we're frightened. You wanted me to say that I need you? Q, I need you. Now, what was the purpose of Q exposing the Federation, and then also, in a smaller part, the Enterprise D to the Borg? And then Q looked at him, and he realized that he was at his wit's end, and he was begging. And then what Q did was snapped his fingers and knocked them back 7,000 light years. Now, Q didn't do them no favors in the sense that he didn't erase the memory of their presence with the Borg, but what he did was gave the Federation time to prepare. That was the whole point, because the Federation and the Romulan Empire did not know what force had destroyed their outposts. They assumed it was each other at first because, they're Cold War adversaries. But in actuality, it was the Borg, a new and powerful and unseen force in the galaxy. And they both were unable to stop it. The Romulans, if they tried to go against the Borg, they would get destroyed. They would get annihilated easy. 1 or 2 Borg cubes would have went through Romulan space, no problem. But what Q did, because he had an affinity for the Federation, especially humanity, is he gave them an opportunity to see what their future was. And they had to get off of their laurels, and they had to stop being so arrogant. And it gave them the opportunity to prepare and study the battle damage from the Enterprise. Because when the Enterprise got finally back to space dock, and those Federation admirals and those weapons experts saw the damage that was inflicted on the Enterprise D, the Galaxy class, the top of the line, the flagship, the most powerful ship in the Federation, they realized, oh shit, somebody out there got technology far more advanced than what we've encountered. And then they saw the video log of Q. So it was a lesson. It was a lesson in humility. It was a lesson to come off one's hubris. It was a lesson to realize that you're not as powerful as you think. And this was the beauty of Q. His encounters every single time with the crew of the Enterprise, and especially at Picard at large, was to teach a lesson. And this is why Q is not a villain. This is why Q is not a frenemy. Q, in all honesty, is a mentor and a teacher of humanities. Anyway, thank you for your time. As I said before, like, share, and subscribe. And in the comment section, give me your thoughts on what you thought about Q and the encounter of the crew with the Borg. I really think that it was a life lesson that the Enterprise crew needed. And we need it in our lives especially, because sometimes we go out in our lives and we think we are the best, We think nobody can tell us nothing. And in actuality, we're wrong. It's a fallacy of our thoughts. Live long and prosper.